Poštovani gledatelji, dobra vam večer. Pratite Global Fokus, ja sam Ivana Dragičević. Evo što vam večeras donosimo. Broj zaraženih u Europi raste, rastu i napetosti. Napad desnice na zgradu slovačke vlade, premijer najavio testirat ću cijelu naciju. Dekapitacija učitelja u Francuskoj šokirala državu. Sekularna Francuska kreće u borbu protiv radikalnog islamizma. Kakva je budućnost europske opskrbe hranom? Budućnost europske poljoprivrede mora se uskladiti s ciljevima zelenog plana. Broj zaraženih koronavirusom u Europi raste. Francuska je prešla 1 milijun zaraženih, a u Njemačkoj je prvi puta zabilježen dnevni porast od preko 10.000 novih infekcija. Njemačka vlada u ime država članica Europske unije izradila je pak tekst prijedloga reforme Svjetske zdravstvene organizacije u kojem traži uspostavljanje mjera kojima bi se povećala transparentnost nacionalnog poštivanja međunarodnih zdravstvenih propisa te ubrzala razmjena informacija. A Slovačka je još jedna europska država koja bilježi rekordan broj zaraženih. Premijer Igor Matović najavio je kako planira na koronavirus testirati sve stanovnike starije od 10 godina. Istodobno nezadovoljstvo u zemlji raste, a prije koji dan zgradu vlade napale su skupine bliske radikalnoj desnici. O situaciji u Slovačkoj razgovarala sam sa sociologom Michalom Vaseckom, direktora Bratislava Policy instituta. Professor Vasecka, welcome to our program. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for the invitation.
We saw that Slovakia also, along with the Czech Republic and other Eastern European countries, has high rise of corona cases. But your Prime Minister made an interesting suggestion, and that is to test the whole population. How come and what's going on concerning this suggestion of his?
Yes, that's true. Slovak Prime Minister Igor Matović announced testing of the whole population during the weekend. So we are now getting all possible details, and what we know is that it will be conducted by Slovak army predominantly. And we are going to do it most likely because Slovak numbers are pretty bad. During the first wave, Slovakia was among those countries which were doing not only relatively fine, but actually we're one of the best in the region. At the moment, we are following a rather unfortunate case of the Czech Republic. And the testing is simply understood by Prime Minister and many experts as a kind of a game changer. And it's also prevention of the complete lockdown, because if it will fail, Slovakia, unfortunately, as many other countries, will be probably heading toward lockdown, as we saw, let's say, in case of Israel very recently.
But how does he plan to test 5.5 million people? It's voluntarily, but what's the idea?
Well, Slovakia has 5.4 million people, and of course, only those who are over 10 years will be tested. But it's voluntarily, exactly as you said, and that's a tricky thing about the whole testing. Because let's repeat, and we know it, the situation is basically very similar also in Croatia and in many, many other countries of Central and Eastern Europe. Some people are actually saying that COVID-19 doesn't exist at all. Others are saying that this is a kind of a conspiracy of pharmaceutical firms, and they are rejecting any regulations of the government. Others are saying basically that they are not afraid. And many, unfortunately, will say, and we see it from Facebook and other social media, that they are turning it into kind of a referendum about Igor Matovic's government, because they are very unhappy about his relatively chaotic style of governing Slovakia. So, consequently, it will be probably not the test of the whole population, but most likely of half, or in the best case, of 2/3 of population.
You've mentioned the Prime Minister. He's actually a new Prime Minister because he got elected at the beginning of this year. His government swore in March. So basically, that's the COVID government, if I can call it like that. But we saw the other day some really hardcore, I can see pictures of the protests in front of the government in Bratislava, of some, I think, football supporter groups, extreme right wing. We saw the children that were asked to shout some swear words to the prime minister. So who are these people? And you've mentioned some processes before answering my questions in Slovakia that we see present in other countries. Who are these guys in front of the government? And can you just put it into correlation with this mandate of prime minister?
True that Igor Matović's government started practically during days of when the first case of COVID-19 was discovered in Slovakia. This government consists of 4 political parties, and generally speaking, it's very heterogeneous and incoherent government consisting of rather conservative and also liberal political parties. And what is uniting them is an attempt to come over the oligarchic legacy of 12 years of Fico's government, previous Prime Minister Fico's government. So it's what is behind it is the attempt to move Slovakia from kind of a mafia state, kidnapped state, into genuine liberal democracy. The truth is that they are not particularly successful, also due to COVID-19 crisis, that has to be said, but also due to very chaotic style of governing of Prime Minister Matović. So generally speaking, I would say that government cannot be evaluated as unsuccessful, but unfortunately, political style and communication of a prime minister is actually putting a lot of question marks about the future of this coalition at the moment.
An interesting thing, just to interrupt you shortly, interesting thing is what you said after he got elected. You kind of warned that the prime minister has started to transform the anger of the society into class war. What does it mean?
The problem started right at the beginning with COVID-19 because it started to stigmatize the various segments of society, people who belong to upper middle classes, even to middle classes. And very soon it started to be very clear that he's prime minister of rather lower classes of a society. So he started to utilize, although he's rather conservative oriented, he started to utilize the terminology which we remember from communist times, which we remember from Marxist Leninists, so to say, and that was very interesting. He's probably the first prime minister of Slovakia who is at the same time very anti-intellectual, anti-elitist, and anti-expert oriented. Because some of previous prime ministers were very anti-intellectual, but definitely not anti-expert. But he's kind of symbolizing the revolt against rationality and a revolt against expert systems, I would say. So now he's rather supported by lower social classes in a society, and by those who are less educated. The so-called elite of the country is very embarrassed in many ways by his performance.
And who are these guys in front of the government who are protesting?
Well, generally speaking, those people were football hooligans. But let me remind you, many of them were belonging to supporters or even members of People's Party, Our Slovakia, which is, let's make a long story short, which is a fascist party, neo-Nazi party. So on purpose, I'm not speaking about far right political party, because by far right we very often understand even very concrete parties in France, Italy, or even in Croatia. But this party is neo-Nazi. So these people got into the parliament in 2016, and they were confirmed in 2020, unlike Golden Dawn in Greece. They are basically questioning everything, the whole legitimacy of a liberal democracy regime that Slovakia started to build after November 1989. And they are ready to turn Slovakia into the kind of a corporate system, very similar to what we might remember from Mussolini's times. I would compare their policies actually very, very similar to those which we remember from history from Italy.
We saw that last week their leader, he was a member of parliament, Mr. Kotleba, was sentenced at the court also because of disseminating Nazist ideas. You've mentioned the case of Golden Dawn in Greece, but this is something now that as we are seeing in Europe, this kind of parties being into parliament and then gathering their supporters and then at the end having destiny like this. So do you think that it could like boomerang or not?
Honestly speaking, the sentencing of Mr. Kotleba, to jail, which is, of course, which will be confirmed or not confirmed by the Supreme Court, so it's not final yet. We cannot understand as the end of People's Party, our Slovakia, because this is just first and rather positive sign that finally Slovak judiciary started to deal with the situation. And let me repeat, the whole party actually exists only thanks to rather alibistic and problematic decisions of governments from the years 2008, 2009, when this party was still very, very small and insignificant, supported by basically 0.15% of total population of Slovakia. So they were absolutely marginal, but several, in my understanding, very stupid and alibistic decisions of Slovak judges gave them a chance to rise. And after 2016, it was basically too late because they made it into the parliament. So this is a first sign that they can be punished, that their activities are punishable. Because let me repeat, there are several cases in the past when various excesses of this party ended basically in almost nothing. The court basically said that we don't want to deal with it, and there was also appeal to the Supreme Court to dissolve the party, and the Supreme Court basically said we cannot dissolve party based on this proposal by the Prosecutor General. And I must say, and that will be the last sentence about it, that the whole General Prosecutor prepared very problematic and, in my understanding of many experts, very weak material. So to be a judge of the Supreme Court, I would basically say the same, that they cannot be dissolved.
Talking about the COVID situation and the situation before that, we had a trend in Visegrad countries. Now we saw that the money of the EU has to be in a way connected with respecting the rule of law. The moment in recent Slovak history was the moment of the killing of the journalist Kuciak and his girlfriend and the colleague in his work. And everyone thought that maybe this can be this watershed moment to change this combination of, corruption with the high politics, which is not something that is imminent just to Slovakia. We saw it also in Croatia and other countries. So do you think that Kuciak moment changed things? And how would you evaluate how would the COVID situation, we heard some of your thoughts, but how would at the end affect the state rule of law after all this is passed?
First of all, the whole murder of Kuciak and his fiancée Kushnirova changed Slovakia very much. First of all, the whole young generation in Slovakia understood it as an attack against them. It's really shaping their identity. And that was the last drop into the glass when people basically said enough is enough. Somebody is systematically trying to kidnap our state from us. So, there is a mafia in this state which is running the country, and we have enough. The same is happening in many other countries. Let's for instance, remember Bulgaria or even Serbia these days. So, Slovakia is definitely not unique. It brought the Fico's and later Pellegrini's government down, and it gave a chance to the existence of this very government. I must say that in many instances there are very visible changes. They are not as quick as we hoped. That's definitely true, but they are visible. Let me give you an example. Constitutional Court was basically paralyzed a year ago and now it's functioning relatively well. Supreme Court was deeply problematic institution where oligarchs had a lot of impact on its functioning. It's not the case anymore. Council of Judges, which is basically a self-governing body of judges, which was deeply problematic 2 years ago, is running relatively smoothly at the moment. There are visible changes in police. Police is basically arresting various criminals practically every week in Slovakia. In Slovak history, we never witnessed anything like that. And let me remind you and Croatian viewers that there are more than 15 judges who are at the moment in jail waiting for sentences. Sometimes out of humor, we are saying that there are more judges who are already in jail in Slovakia than in the rest of Europe. So that there are visible changes. The truth is that two things are making the whole story more problematic and are slowing down the processes. Firstly, COVID-19, and secondly, and I must repeat it, the very chaotic style of governance by Prime Minister Igor Matovic, who has very good intentions in this respect, but his style is very provocative and he's losing support among his coalition partners, but also in the eyes of population.
Mr. Vasecka, thank you so much for this conversation, and I hope that we can exchange more ideas between countries of Eastern Europe. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for the invitation.
A iako živimo u svijetu u kojem se, kažu, sve manje čita i kritički razmišlja, povijest nas je naučila kakav utjecaj imaju riječi i knjige. U Mađarskoj je proteklih dana jedna dječja knjiga izazvala reakcije koje su podsjetile na neka mračna vremena europske povijesti. Boldižar Nađi imao je plemenitu namjeru, izdavši dječju knjigu nazvanu Zemlja čuda je za sve. Želio je dati glas onima bez glasa, siromašnima, različitima po etničkom, vjerskom, ali i rodnom identitetu. Mislio je da će pomoći mladima da nauče prihvatiti druge i drugačije i da se bore protiv društvenog ostracizma.
Nagyon sajnálatosnak tartjuk mindannyian, hogy ez egy ilyen politikai eszközzé vált. Nem szerettünk volna egyik oldal mellett sem zászlót lobogtatva tüntetni. Úgy érezzük, hogy méltatlan az, hogy egy gyerekkönyvet használnak uszításra, gyűlöletkeltésre vagy politikai haszonszerzésre.
Prvo izdanje od 1500 primjeraka brzo je rasprodano, a onda je uslijedila reakcija. Prvo radikalno desne stranke Naša domovina.
Nem lehet normálisnak beállítani azt, ami valójában nem az. Nem tűri a Mi Hazánk mozgalom, hogy a gyerekeket kitegyék a homoszexuális propagandának már azzal is, hogy mesekönyvekbe csempészik be az abnormális életformát.
Više od 1200 psihologa potpisalo je peticiju potpore knjizi, a zbog javnog uništavanja pobunilo se i društvo mađarskih izdavača, nazvavši taj čin gorkim podsjetnikom na nacističko spaljivanje knjiga i poteze komunističkih cenzora. Nakon ovakve reakcije izdano je još novih 15.000 primjeraka, što je za mađarsko tržište velika naklada. Upitan o knjizi u jednom radijskom intervjuu, mađarski premijer Orban izjavio je da je Mađarska tolerantna zemlja prema homoseksualnosti, no postoji crvena linija koju se ne prelazi. Ostavite našu djecu na miru, poručio je Orban.
Egyre erősebben zajlik körülöttünk egy vita, már késhegyre menő harc, amely arról szól, hogy mi legyen a gyerekeinkkel. Milyen hatások érjék őket? Milyen értékek alapján rendezzék be az életüket? Hogyan viszonyuljanak családjukhoz, magyarságukhoz, sőt, a tulajdon nemükhöz is.
Šef kabineta vlade bio je doslovniji.
Gyerekek irányába nem kell homoszexuális propagandát folytatni, és ez nem megengedhető, ez szerintem kiskorú veszélyeztetése.
Iako Europska povelja o osnovnim pravima zahtjeva zaštitu svih manjina, pa tako i seksualnih, u različitim europskim državama zakonske regulative i političke prakse često su diskriminatorne. Boldižar Nađi, izdavač knjige u kojoj pepeljuga može biti Romkinja, a Snježna kraljica lezbika, kaže kako je u Mađarskoj sve više mržnje i frustracije,
želja. Njegova želja bila je samo djeci pokazati kako je svijet različit i kako ga mogu prihvatiti.
A djecu o svijetu podučavaju učitelji. Jedan od njih bio je i moj vršnjak, Samuel Paty. Bio je omiljeni učitelj povijesti u jednom pariškom predgrađu koji je među ostalim djeci govorio i o tome što znači sekularnost i sloboda govora. Ono što je u suštini francuskog ustava i republike. Kada je na satu, kako bi ilustrirao ono što predaje, djeci pokazao karikature proroka Muhameda, krenula je hajka na društvenim mrežama. Događalo se to nakon što je predsjednik države najavio borbu protiv separatizma i radikalnog islamizma, čije organizacije djecu u Francuskoj ne puštaju u škole. Za šaku eura neka djeca iz škole u kojoj je predavao Paty, ne znajući o čemu se radi, prstom su na cesti uprle u učitelja kada ih je neko pitao za njega. A onda je taj isti ubojica, 18-godišnji mladić čečenskog podrijetla, usred bijela dana učitelja décapitirao.
Confirmé, un de nos concitoyens a été assassiné aujourd'hui parce qu'il enseignait, parce qu'il apprenait à des élèves la liberté d'expression, la liberté de croire et de ne pas croire. Notre compatriote a été lâchement attaqué, a été la victime d'un attentat terroriste.
Mon fils, il a compris directement. Le soir où il est rentré, il a compris directement que c'était pas pour discriminer. Il m'a dit non, il n'a pas voulu nous blesser, c'était des images, il n'a pas voulu qu'on les voie. Pour mon fils, à aucun moment, il a voulu être... il a voulu manquer de respect ou quelque chose comme ça.
En fait, elle a un nom. Elle se nomme islamisme. L'acte est commis par des barbares qui ignorent le sens même de nos valeurs les plus sacrées et croient pouvoir faire triompher, y compris dans le sang, l'obscurantisme le plus hideux. Ce qui s'est passé le 16 octobre n'est pas vraiment une surprise, mais une nouvelle étape dans la dégradation de la situation.
La terreur se combat par l'éducation, par l'enseignement auquel Samuel Paty croyait, tel qu'il les pratiquait. Un enseignement bienveillant et critique, ouvert sur la société, sur l'autre, prônant le dialogue et la connaissance. Ce combat est quotidien. Il est engagé par des millions d'enseignants qui, menant leur mission avec courage et détermination, et qui ont besoin de notre soutien, du soutien d'une société pour laquelle la liberté d'expression est une valeur fondamentale, un principe majeur.
Défendre l'école, c'est défendre ses enseignants et leur enseignement. C'est aussi interdire les formes clandestines d'enseignement qui ne sont qu'un endoctrinement. Enfin, nous ne pouvons plus nous résoudre à assister passivement au déchaînement de la haine sur les réseaux sociaux.
Est-ce qu'on doit continuer d'enseigner la liberté d'expression et montrer les caricatures du prophète Mahomet?
Oui, oui à la liberté. Moi je suis là, je lui dis, c'est un martyr. C'est un martyr de la liberté. C'est un martyr, c'est un homme sage. Il a enseigné la tolérance, et la civilisation, et le respect de l'autre. Il faut qu'ils comprennent, il faut que les parents s'engagent d'enseigner et de montrer à leurs enfants que les pour caricature, pour une photo, on décapite quelqu'un. Mais on est où? C'est pas l'islam, sorry. C'est pas la religion, c'est l'islamisme. C'est le poison de l'islam. Cette maladie. Et on enseigne, et on met des photos. Normalement, le vendredi prochain, tous les mosquées de France, ils font une prière pour le professeur.
Is it getting better? Or do you feel the same? Will it make it easier on you now? You got someone to blame. You said one love, one life. When it's one need in the night, one love, we get to share it. Leaves you, baby, if you don't care for it.
Samuel Paty est devenu vendredi le visage de la République, de notre volonté de briser les terroristes, de réduire les islamistes, de vivre comme une communauté de citoyens libres dans notre pays, le visage de notre détermination à comprendre, à apprendre, à continuer d'enseigner, à être libre.
Paty je sinoć posthumno odlikovan najvećim znamenom Francuske republike ordenom Legije časti. Od brutalne 2015. napada na Charlie Hebdo i Bataclan, Francuska pokušava pronaći način za borbu protiv ekstremizma i radikalizma. Velika je to politička tema. Nakon ubojstva učitelja, policija je krenula u akciju uhićenja i zabrane militantnih tajnih skupina. O situaciji u Francuskoj razgovarala sam sa Chemsom Akroufom, stručnjakom za radikalizaciju.
Monsieur Akrouf, bonjour et bienvenue dans notre programme.
Bonjour.
Nous avons vu cette attaque brutale à Paris. Comment vous décrivez-vous la situation en France aujourd'hui?
Alors, c'est une situation très difficile qui intervient malheureusement dans un établissement scolaire avec un professeur qui a été tué sauvagement et qui vient cristalliser une colère en France. Juste après le discours il y a 2 semaines du président de la République, président Macron, qui venait d'annoncer des mesures concrètes pour lutter contre le séparatisme, donc contre le repli identitaire. Donc effectivement, ça tombe plutôt mal. Je pense qu'il y a l'effet de la crise sanitaire liée au Covid-19 qui vient, en plus de la difficulté du terrorisme, accentuer un peu les tensions. Et ce qui fait malgré les annonces du président, ce dernier, lors de la réunion du Conseil de défense extraordinaire qui a eu lieu hier, va probablement annoncer des mesures aujourd'hui ou dans la semaine pour aller plus loin dans la lutte contre le terrorisme, avec probablement des prises de décision concernant les fichiers S en France et contre tout ce qui peut être facteur aggravant contre l'islam radical, le salafisme et bien évidemment des mesures tant sur le plan politique mais aussi prouver aux Français qu'il a pris les choses en main.
Nous savons que c'est un problème grave en France. C'est quoi dans ce plan de président Macron?
Le président souhaite, à travers justement les mesures qu'il a annoncées sur le séparatisme, la lutte contre le terrorisme, aller plus loin dans ce qui peut être des facteurs liés au culte, liés au financement des associations, sur la déscolarisation des enfants, et bien évidemment renforcer les mesures coercitives qu'on peut mettre en place dans le cadre de la lutte antiterroriste. Donc il y a une forte tension en France qu'on n'a pas connue à travers les autres attentats et qui se transcende avec beaucoup d'annonces et beaucoup de réactions politiques qui mettent en difficulté le gouvernement et qui doit, dans ce cadre, montrer sa force et sa détermination.
Nous avons vu beaucoup de la situation radicale, de la radicalisation à travers le continent, parcours des réseaux sociaux. Comment le gérer ça?
C'est très difficile dès lors que maintenant les terroristes savent qu'ils sont surveillés sur les réseaux sociaux. On a trois profils, trois catégories. On a ceux qui sont projetés et qui sont en lien avec l'organisation, qu'on appelle la classe A. Ceux-là veulent construire des attentats de masse avec une forte dynamique de communication. Ceux-là sont formés, ils sont armés. Les B, c'est la catégorie B, c'est ceux qui ne sont pas en lien, qui sont traités sur le plan virtuel ou tout simplement en lien avec un individu, qui n'ont pas de compétences, mais qui vont utiliser des véhicules béliers ou des couteaux. Et enfin, on a la catégorie de la classe C, c'est des gens qui ont des troubles pathologiques, psychologiques, et qui vont agir avec les mêmes modes opératoires, ils vont mimer le mode opératoire, mais ceux-là, ils sont indétectables parce qu'ils ne sont pas sur les lieux ou fréquentent pas des endroits qui peuvent être surveillés par les services de renseignement. Donc, théoriquement, tout ce qui est projeté, tout ce qui est organisé, les services de renseignement peuvent l'anticiper, mais lorsqu'on a du terrorisme interne fait sur place, sans aucun lien avec l'extérieur, malheureusement, ces acteurs du terrorisme deviennent invisibles pour les services de renseignement.
Nous savons beaucoup de la radicalisation islamiste djihadiste en France et en Europe, mais quelle est la situation avec la radicalisation de l'extrême droite en France?
Alors, plus on a d'attentats, plus il y a des arguments chez ceux qui sont dans l'extrême droite pour stigmatiser l'incompétence du gouvernement face à l'immigration. Donc, ces sujets sont très liés. On a une libération de la parole d'extrême droite sur les médias qui n'hésite pas maintenant à faire des amalgames en confondant des terroristes qui se revendiquent de l'islam et avec les musulmans. Ce qui fait que ça a des effets pervers. Les gens qui vont se sentir stigmatisés ont tendance à se rapprocher dans ce qu'on appelle le communautarisme. Donc là, on est tout à fait dans le séparatisme. Et parallèlement à ça, on est sur des enjeux politiques. Donc la vraie difficulté, c'est comment traiter le risque terroriste sans tomber dans l'amalgame ou sans tomber sur les problématiques liées au fait de croire ou de ne pas croire, donc de la laïcité.
Vous-même, vous travaillez dans une communauté en France sur un projet de déradicalisation. C'est quoi ça?
L'idée, moi actuellement, je travaille dans une ville du Val d'Oise, Argenteuil, qui comprend 110 000 habitants avec une population plutôt diversifiée, issue de l'immigration, mais avec également des mosquées, 2 grandes mosquées, une synagogue et des lieux de culte catholiques. Et l'idée, c'était de former les agents municipaux, donc qui sont au cœur du système de la ville, pour éviter la discrimination, qui ne confondent pas un salafiste avec un terroriste, et 2, être moins naïfs vis-à-vis de ce qu'on appelle les petits indices qui pourraient permettre d'identifier un individu sur la voie de la radicalisation. Donc, ça représente une formation de 1500 agents qui deviennent des capteurs spécialisés et qui vont nous permettre, à travers tous les différents secteurs de la ville, l'éducation, le logement, les affaires scolaires, d'avoir de l'information pertinente et d'être mieux à même de comprendre si on est face à un cas qu'il faut rapidement prendre en compte. Donc, c'est une expérimentation locale menée par le gouvernement et par la ville d'Argenteuil, qui est une ville pilote et qui, je pense, sera développée sur l'ensemble du territoire national.
Et pour la fin de votre expérience, la discrimination, la situation d'inégalité dans une société, combien c'est important pour le processus de la radicalisation et comment vous faites déradicalisation avec ça?
Alors, le principe, c'est aussi de permettre aux gens de connaître leurs droits, de mettre des mots sur les ressentis de racisme, de discrimination et leur permettre de comprendre que l'État lutte, que nous avons des lois européennes, nous avons des lois en France qui permettent d'empêcher ces discriminations et 2, leur permettre de comprendre que la France, pour la France, n'est pas d'accord avec ce que les gens peuvent vivre au quotidien. Donc le fait de leur montrer qu'on leur apprend leurs droits, c'est aussi les ramener vers la République et lutter de manière efficace contre tout ce qui peut être facteur aggravant de repli identitaire et de sentiment d'abandon. Donc lutter contre l'insécurité, contre la pauvreté, fait partie aussi des couches nécessaires pour prévenir le risque de radicalisation.
Monsieur Akrouf, merci beaucoup pour cette interview.
Merci à vous.
Poštovani gledatelji, idemo sada na kratak predah. Ne napuštajte program, vraćamo se brzo. Poštovani gledatelji, ponovno smo u Global Fokusu. Sjetimo se slika iz proljeća. Građani Europe, najbogatijeg kontinenta na svijetu, pustoše police dućana, gomilaju hranu. Europa danas za svoju budućnost kao rješenje vidi zeleni plan. Samoodrživa i zelena poljoprivreda i sigurnost hrane bit će, kažu, važni za našu budućnost. Europa ima zajedničku poljoprivrednu politiku, a usklađivanje grane koja je nužna za opstanak svih nas, ali ujedno bila i veliki zagađivač, dio je procesa prijelaznog perioda usklađivanja zajedničke europske poljoprivredne politike. O tome se ovoga tjedna govorilo i u Europskom vijeću i u parlamentu. Tim povodom prekjučer sam razgovarala s članom odbora za poljoprivredu Europskog parlamenta Herbertom Dorffmanom. Evo izvatka iz razgovora, cijeli možete pogledati na našem webu i Facebooku. Mr. Dorffman, good evening and welcome to our program.
Good evening.
So we see with the pandemics, with climate change, with Brexit, so common agricultural policy became one of the really important and always was one of the really important issues of the EU. We know that we have now this extension period for adjusting to the new circumstances and adjusting our overall agricultural policy. So can you just explain us at the moment state of play between the European Parliament, Council, and what can we expect?
Yes, indeed. I think common agricultural policy has always been, or in the last 50 years, one of the most important policies in Europe, and it's clearly being connected with expenses. So with the multi-annual financial framework, it's connected with the period of the multi-annual financial framework. So the actual programming period expires end of this year, and at the beginning of the next year, there should be a new common agricultural policy. As we are voting only in these days, and the member states afterwards have to do their strategic plans and their rural development plans, there will be a transitional period of 2 years. For now, we in the European Parliament, we will have the vote this week. We will start this evening and go on till Friday evening, and then starts a dialogue with the Council. The Council is united on today in a meeting in Luxembourg. They will define at the very same moment the Council position. So we are both ready for the dialogue. This means for the final negotiations between Parliament and Council, and I hope we will close them within the next months.
Pandemic showed us how important food security is in that sense, how important it is to have safe supply chains in Europe, in our common market, but basically it also showed our dependency on some, I don't know, from antibiotics that are important for the cattle, etc., that comes from China. And on the other hand, it kind of shows us, and it's the strategy of this commission, that we need to move forward towards a new green and digital Europe. We know that CAP was in a way, of course, expensive because of subsidies and the importance and the vastness of the agricultural policy. How can we combine this new CAP, this new negotiation framework, with the Green Deal, with Farm to Fork, with biodiversity strategies, which are all on the forefront of this Commission?
Yes, indeed. I agree with you. I think food security or availability of food was something like normal in the last decades in Europe. Nobody thought about this. It was normal for everybody having the supermarkets full with products. The COVID crisis opened a bit the eyes to people, and people understand that also the availability of food, so food security is an important tool for politics. And in the COVID crisis, we saw that how complicated things become if Europe is not self-sufficient. If I think, for example, what happened in the medical device or masks, which we bought from all over the world, with a lot of problems. So this changed a bit the eyes, but for clear, there is a tendency in the European policy, and the most important expression of this is the Green Deal, that we want to be a continent which is sustainable, which fulfills its obligation if it comes to climate change and the Paris Agreement, and they have to introduce this within the common agriculture policy. And for sure, we can also in the common agriculture and in agriculture, not only in the policy, but farmers themselves can do further efforts to be sustainable, as they already did in the last years, because we always had also in the last decades, we had programs for sustainability in our policy. If I think, for example, to the agro-environmental plans in the second pillar, in the rural development plans, or in the eco schemes or the greening we had in the last years. So I think we should go on this path, but we need a balance between sustainable production on one side and food security on the other side.
Protivim se ideji da politika mora biti mjesto puno ega i prostor gdje si konstantno fokusiran na zbrajanje udaraca jedan drugome. Da, trebamo robustnu demokraciju, no možeš biti snažan, a da budeš nježan. To nisam rekla ja, rekla je to jednom prigodom Jacinda Ardern, novozelandska premijerka. Prošloga je tjedna ostvarila najveću izbornu pobjedu za njezine laburiste u posljednjih pola stoljeća, te će sami formirati vladu. U prvom mandatu bila je suočena s nezapamćenim terorističkim napadom na Novom Zelandu i korona krizom, a kreirala je i državni proračun koji brine za siromašne, bolesne i socijalno ugrožene. Empatija je bila prva riječ kojom se u svijetu opisivala njezina politika. Prigoda je to da se podsjetimo i na neke poruke liderice koju u svijetu nazivaju modelom vodstva za 21. stoljeće.
We are living in an increasingly polarized world, a place where more and more people have lost the ability to see one another's point of view. I hope that this election, New Zealand has shown that this is not who we are, that as a nation we can listen and we can debate. After all, we are too small to lose sight of other people's perspective. Elections aren't always great at bringing people together, but they also don't need to tear one another apart. I am by no means the first woman to multitask, and in terms of being a woman in politics, there are plenty of women who carved a path and incrementally have led the way to be able to make it possible for people to look upon my time in leadership and think, yes, I can do the job and be a mother. Me Too must become We Too. We are all in this together.
A Prime Minister here, and
you're not going to put it all on me, are you?
Yeah.
Actually, this is about being on the right side of history. And do you want to be a leader that you look back in time and say that you were on the wrong side of the argument when the world was crying out for a solution?
Yeah.
And it's as simple as that, I think.
Yeah, well said, well said. Yeah.
They have chosen to make New Zealand their home, and it is their home. They are us. The person who has perpetuated this violence against us is not.
A sinoć je na filmskom festivalu u Rimu prikazan dokumentarni film Francesco, odnosno Franjo, autora Evgenija Finevskog. On je želio da njegov dokumentarac pošalje poruku nade, pa je za glavnog lika izabrao jedinog svjetskog čelnika koji po njemu može ujediniti svijet, papu Franju. Film smješta papu u središte radnje koja se bavi globalnim svjetskim problemima.
Come la tragica pandemia di coronavirus ci sta dimostrando, abbiamo mancato nel custodire la terra, la nostra casa giardino. L'abbiamo inquinata, l'abbiamo depredata, mettendo in pericolo la nostra stessa vita.
You know what? Actually, the main thread of this movie is more us as a human beings who creating disasters every day. And he is the one who connecting us through these threads, through these issues, through these headlines. And I think he's the one who basically giving us to understand that we are the monsters and we creating really horrible things for ourselves. But at the same time, he allows us to understand that even doing a mistake, we can admit this mistake and change our course, save our lives, build more better future.
This is a man who's opened his heart to the hearts of all of humanity. This is a man who cries with humanity, who laughs with humanity, who suffers with humanity. This is Pope Francis.
If the climate disasters that we created, or refugee and migration crisis that we also created, or inequality, or sexual abuse, because it's not necessarily sexual abuse in a church, it's sexual abuse in Hollywood, because it's abuse of the power. So technically, I not see this movie as Pope Francis. I see this movie us as the main character and him as somebody who navigating us through these things and through his humble lessons of his life, through his humble learning situations of his life, teaching us, hey, you see, I'm step by step doing something. You can each and every person do something like this.
La humanidad vive una crisis que no es solamente económica y financiera. También es ecológica, educativa, moral, humana. I'm convinced that we can make a difference. I'm sure. Una persona che pensa soltanto in fare muri e non fare ponti non è cristiano. Un'altra volta. E per questo, perché tutti siamo fratelli, vogliamo la pace.
Nisam dobra. Osjećam da sam na dnu. Molim vas, ako vidite ovaj tweet, odvojite nekoliko sekundi da mi napišete zdravo. Opet nisam to rekla ja, napisao je to prije koji dan na Twitteru za svijet potpuno anonimni Edmund O'Leary iz Engleske. Nekadašnji savjetnik za mentalno zdravlje, bez posla već 18 mjeseci. Rastavljen, živi sam. Ono što se dogodilo ipak daje neku nadu. Tweet mu je pregledan više od 10 milijuna puta, a na svoj apel iz samoće i teškog mentalnog stanja dobio je više od 100.000 odgovora ohrabrenja iz cijelog svijeta. Od globalno poznatih pjevača i glumaca do običnih ljudi. Zato ako se tako osjećate, recite nisam dobro i potražite pomoć. To je normalno i u redu. Poštovani gledatelji, noćas budite uz program N1 jer prenosimo posljednju debatu Trump-Biden. Gledali ste Global Fokus, budite s nama idućeg četvrtka, pratite nas na webu i društvenim mrežama. I za kraj, u znak solidarnosti s medicinskim osobljem na svijetu u pandemiji, Svjetska zdravstvena organizacija pokrenula je kampanju nazvanu Mi smo obitelj, nazvanu prema istoimenom disko klasiku Sestara Sledge, kako bi ukazali na to da nas nitko neće čuvati ako ne čuvamo jedni druge. Stoga čuvajte sebe i druge, ostanite zdravi i dalje uz program N1. Srdačan pozdrav.
First of all, I am grateful that that song has such a broad meaning. But it's a meaning that's very, very focused. And that focused meaning is that we are family, be it global, be it a small, tiny, one-person family. A family is the affection and the care and the love and the desire to be unified and protect and just be kind to those around you. And with this pandemic, to me, it's brought the whole world together as a family.